So I've had an idea for a brand new Minecraft MineColonies challenge that I wanted to try out. Simply put, the challenge is to speedrun from starting out on a fresh new world and collecting every item required in order to build and upgrade a builder's hut from tier 1 to tier 5. To save on a bit of explanation time, I am going to assume that if you're watching this video, then you'll already have some form of understanding about the MineColonies mod and what a tier 5 builder's hut is. But if not, then I've left a brief description of them within this video's own description, which you can read to get a general idea of what they are about. Now, I do want to preface the following before I get into the actual challenge. I am not a speedrunner. I am actually very mediocre at video games in general, especially with Minecraft, which I'm sure that regulars to the channel will agree with me on this. I am definitely no dream whenever it comes to Minecraft, although I'm pretty sure that it will seem as if I was half asleep during this challenge anyway, with how long it took. So I'm not looking to break any records or anything at all speed-wise with this challenge. This is more just to see if it could be done. I will say though that this challenge was tough, but really a lot of fun to do, and I truly hope that you all will enjoy it as well. In the background just now, we are watching my initial setup of the challenge, which was basically me just preparing an area to place down a supply camp to begin with. But whilst it's running, I'm going to quickly take the time to cover the general rules that I followed for this challenge. I'm playing on version 1.16 of the MineColonies mod, purely because I already have a few different other mods and data packs installed that I will be using during this run. I'm going to be making a wooden styled builder's hut for this challenge, so I regenerated a few worlds until I came across a potentially decent looking one, with a lot of oak and birch around to help me get started. I decided to build directly at the spawn point of the world so that I would have an easy return back to the colony if and when I died at any point during the run. I also set a home trigger teleport command to teleport me directly back to the colony as well, just to save on some potential needless deaths of me dying and being teleported back there as a fast travel option. On the subject of death, I also changed the world's game rules so that I kept all items on death. Again, this is just to save time and avoid endless trips of me heading back to collect my stuff whenever I do inevitably die. I will be using Zero's world map to navigate my way around the world so that I didn't spend all of my runtime searching for a specific biome or structure just to get a particular item from it. And finally, even with the additional help of the world map, if after a while I'm still struggling to find a specific biome or structure, then I can use the locate command to search for it and then head towards it. Just no direct teleporting to it will be allowed. And with the rules now out of the way, I've paused the video at the point just before I set the supply camp up for construction. The second I accept the supply camp for build, then the timer will start and the challenge will officially begin. The challenge is classed as officially over and the timer will stop at the second that the builder achieves their tier 5 builder's hut. And with all of that now being said, we're off. The tier 5 challenge has now begun. The initial part of the run is your standard Minecraft experience. Making some initial wooden tools, upgrading them to stone, then to iron, and if you're lucky, then to diamond. So while I get on with and do that in the background, I'm going to take this time to go over the materials that I will require for this challenge. I chose a wooden style for this challenge, so of course I'm going to need a lot of different types of basic materials: logs, planks, cobblestone, glass, wool, etc. I will get a lot of those materials from the overworld as I continue my run. At tier 1, the builder's hut is at its most standard form and the items required for it couldn't be simpler, which you can see a list of them here. At tier 2, it's pretty much the same story, with maybe just a few more quantities of items required. I believe that spruce wood is the only exotic material required for it. Tier 3 is where it does start to get a bit more complicated, although in saying that, all of the items are still pretty easily obtainable from the overworld. The only difference here to the previous 2 tiers is that some of these items will require a bit more exploration to find, such as finding savannas for acacia wood and jungles for jungle wood. Specific coloured items will also start to make an appearance at this tier as well, which means that items for dyes will also be required. But apart from the travel, that's really the only problem posed for tier 3. Tier 4 is when it does start to get a bit nastier with the requirement of nether based items. Although for this particular style of build, the nether items are still pretty straightforward to get anyway, with netherrack, quartz and soul sand being the main items required, which all other nether based materials can be made from them. Tier 5 is the final and of course the nastiest upgrade to go for, with it requiring nether, end and prismarine materials. Nether-wise, the glowstone and coloured nether bricks won't be too much of an issue to collect whilst down there. Popped chorus fruit would be the only material required to make the end items, but that will still require the defeat of the ender dragon beforehand. Unless I wanted to waste quite a bit of time by making an extra long bridge to another end island. Prismarine items would require me locating an ocean monument and then getting them from it, or from the guardians that protect it. So all in all, without including any of the base parts required to actually make these items, to take this wooden style builder's hut from tier 1 to tier 5, it is going to require nearly 800 separate items to make it. And that's also not including the other materials that I'm going to require in order to aid me in getting those other items, such as Eyes of Ender to find the end stronghold for the end. So the plan for this run is to get to the end as fast as I possibly can, kill the Ender Dragon and get myself the end items required for tier 5, as well as some elytra and shulkers for easier travel and storage, which will require a trip to the Nether beforehand to do a bit of Piglin Trading for those precious Ender Pearls, and finding a fortress for blaze rods to then make some Eyes of Ender. But with the 2 different dimension areas then explored and out of the way, the remaining time of the run will then be spent gathering the materials required from the overworld, which hopefully afterwards I should then have all of the materials required to allow the builder to construct their hut from tier 1 straight through to tier 5 in pretty much one sitting. So yes, an awful lot of work ahead of me, so it is probably a good job by this point then that I've now managed to kit myself out with full iron equipment and now ready to head into the Nether. It's just unfortunate that I will be going diamondless for this run, which does then actually pose the first problem that I'll need to solve, not being able to mine up any obsidian to create a Nether Portal. I could have spent a bit more of the initial parts of this run strip mining for diamonds to help me with this process, but I elected to try out a fairly easy speedrun tactic to help instead. All I would need would be a pool of lava close by that I could use, which fortunately there was one not all that far away from the colony. So I prepared myself as much as I could for the upcoming Nether Trip. I grabbed all of the gold that I had mined up from the cave systems, as well as the gold blocks hidden within the supply camp, and I then set out to make the Nether Portal. Which, honestly, this little trick was pretty much the pinnacle of my speedrunning technique for this run. And even with it being as simple as that, I still almost messed it up with a bit of careless water spilling. But I got there in the end, so off to the Nether I go. I'm just so used to being in the Nether now, it's like my second home. But I spawned into a warped forest, which was actually a great starting place, as Endermen do spawn here, which could assist with the Ender Pearl collection. I used the world map to have a look at my surroundings, and I really struck lucky, as there was both a Crimson Forest for Piglins and a fortress structure for Blazes, really not all that far away. And even more fortuitously, as I was heading out to them, I managed to stumble across another fortress, which was even closer than the one that I was originally going for. And it had a blaze on it. What a great start. I ventured into the fortress on the lookout for some materials required for the tier 4 and 5 parts of the build, and of course to see if there was any blaze spawners around. What's that? Soul sand and nether warts? Don't mind if I do. It also really didn't take that much exploring inside it either before I came across a blaze spawner. So now for the slightly more difficult part of this, with me trying to murder them before they murder me. And the first blaze rod drop. Perfect. I would require quite a few of these rods for different uses within the run, so I spent the next little while hunting them down. Which, yes, I was brutally burned to death by the blazes, and occasionally slaughtered by sneaky wither skeletons. But eventually, I walked away with quite a few rods, which hopefully would be enough for the rest of the run. With the fortress portion now complete, it was time to head over to the Piglins for a spot of trading, which I found and cornered one particular individual, and proceeded to spend quite some time with the chap, trading him my golden ingots for some rather nice goodies in return. And honestly, this really was not worth the time, seeing as it only traded me over 4 ender pearls in total. I did, however, receive some other materials that I would also require for the upgrades as well, such as obsidian, and I was pretty happy with the spectral arrow drops as well, which will save me having to mess about with making arrows back on the overworld at a later point. But with all of my gold now gone, I had to go on the hunt for some more so that I could continue trading. I took this time as well to mine up some quartz and glowstone, which was now everything nether based that I required for the tier 4 and 5 upgrades. And yes, what you're currently watching right now was not required at all for the run, and is purely used here just for the flair. The nasty bugger did ambush me after all whilst I was just mining up some materials, so it more than deserved that fireball straight to the face. I spent quite a lot of the runtime collecting more gold and trading piglins, but I just wasn't getting that many ender pearls. So I had to resort to the old-fashioned method of obtaining them. Alongside a bit more trading, and quite a bit of dying. But eventually, I did manage to obtain a small supply of them, as well as a few stacks of spectral arrows, and that was now everything that I required from the Nether. Before locating the end stronghold, I did some quick preparations for the journey ahead, which mainly involved the collection of some food and materials for arrows and other equipment that I would need for when I explored the end. I wasn't able to make too many Eyes of Ender with all of the materials that I had collected, but I hopefully had just enough to locate the stronghold and complete the end portal inside it. The eyes pointed me in a direction across the cold ocean that I started beside, which was quite fortunate that it did, because I discovered that I was actually very close to an ocean monument in the waters. So that would be the prismarine items then sorted for the tier 5 builds. It also didn't take that long to find the location of the stronghold, which was underneath a mountain. I mined my way down into the mountainside and eventually discovered the brick walls of the stronghold, so I broke in and entered. Finding the end portal room was also pretty straightforward as well, so I quickly set up a mini base within it, knowing full well that there's going to be a few deaths ahead of me. Some final preparations later, and just enough Eyes of Ender to complete the portal, and it was now time to fight the big Ender Dragon. There is probably some really good speedrunning tactics out there that can teach you how to defeat the Ender Dragon pretty efficiently and easily, but honestly, I pretty much just winged this fight. I had my bow and arrows, as well as a sword and a shield, and some food and ladders. That's pretty much as prepared as I was for the fight. I kept my head down to avoid the Enderman's gaze, and built ladders up the height of the obsidian pillars to destroy the end crystals. I tried sparingly to fire at the crystals from a distance, which, even to my own amazement, I actually hit quite a few of them. Overall, the fight went as expected. A few deaths here and there, but I eventually did whittle the dragon's health down and finally killed it. But with it now dead, it was time to find some chorus fruit and hopefully some end cities, so that I could get myself an elytra and some shulkers to help with the later overworld exploration. I do not trust myself whenever it comes to throwing ender pearls for quicker teleporting, so I slowly and cautiously just use some wooden planks to traverse over the different end islands. I grabbed some chorus fruit from one of the islands for the purple items that will be required, and after checking the world map, I spotted the edge of an end city just a few islands over. So I once again slowly and cautiously made my way over to the different islands towards it. And then I slowly climbed, or more or less floated, my way up the length of the tower towards the end ship. Yes, I definitely have a knack for this old speedrunning lark, if you couldn't tell that by now already. I took some time out to raid the chests at the top of the tower in the hopes of obtaining some better gear, which I did get some fairly decent equipment to be honest, including some new enchanted tools which would help with the overworld material collecting. But I eventually made my way over to the ship, which totally didn't nearly end in disaster, not a clue what you're talking about. And then I got my hands on the brewing stand from the lobby of it, as well as the coveted elytra at the back of the ship, and the goodies within its surrounding chests. I proceeded to spend a bit longer in the city trying to get some shulker shell drops, which were a lot rarer to get than I was hoping for. But eventually I found enough of them to make a shulker box, and with everything that I now required from the end, I teleported back to the colony. Now for the part of the run that I was dreading the most, the overworld exploration. At least with the Nether and the End, they can only ever be in the one place that you always know how to get to. But for these other structures and biomes, they could be anywhere in the overworld. And I knew that this would eat up the majority of the time within the run, which it did to be fair. One of the items that I looted from the end city, however, were some enchanted diamond boots with the Frostwalker enchantment on them, which were a perfect match to help me traverse over water faster. I had also to this point been killing creepers pretty religiously as I met them for some gunpowder, which I combined with some paper to make my fireworks for the elytra. So hopefully exploring wouldn't be too horrendous whenever I could just soar through the air, skate over water, all whilst checking my map for nearby points of interest. My first stop was at a swamp biome so that I could collect some vines for the moss covered items for tier 3 and 5. I also grabbed some spruce logs from a little taiga forest that was nearby. I spotted a savanna and a desert biome next to each other, which I stopped off at to collect some acacia for the tier 3 upgrade. I took the time to shear some different coloured sheep that were wandering nearby to save me having to dye some wool later on. The desert biome supplied me with the sand and sandstone required for the tier 5 upgrade. I was also on the lookout for any village that I could find which would have a farm in it that was growing some carrots, which I required so that I could make an invisibility potion. Fortunately, I found one using the world map and managed to bag myself some tasty carrots. After a short jaunt across the ocean to save on some fireworks, I came across a flower biome, which I picked up a few different flowers to be used to dye items later on. Travelling a little bit further out, and I came across a dark oak forest, which I blew up some of the trees in it for some dark oak wood for the tier 3 upgrade. I also knew that creepers love to lurk in the dark shades of these forests, so I spent some time hunting them down as well to try get some more gunpowder. I came across another taiga forest with some coarse dirt and podzol which were required for the tier 3 and tier 5 upgrades. The coarse dirt was fairly straightforward to dig up. Unfortunately though, I didn't have any tool with silk touch on it, so I couldn't collect any of the podzol. But I did have another plan in mind on how to get my hands on some of it later on. I also mined up some handy mossy cobblestones whilst I was there as well. So by this stage of the run, I pretty much had everything required from the mainland of the overworld, apart from some terracotta and jungle materials. Although I knew there was some clay in the river near the supply camp that I could use for the terracotta, so it was really just the jungle materials that I was missing. And by this point, I had now been searching for these different items for long enough to qualify the use of the locate biome command, just to see how far away a jungle biome was from my current location. Which I found one just over 2,000 blocks away, so I made my way towards it. I grabbed some jungle wood, cocoa beans, and any other material that I thought I might require from the jungle, and with that was my mainland overworld exploration then complete. With prismarine blocks now the only item left in the list to collect, I prepared myself for a quick trip out to the closest ocean monument. I planned on making myself a water breathing potion alongside a potion of invisibility to get in and out of the monument as quickly as I could. But for the water breathing potion, I had to do a spot of fishing first for a puffer fish, which certainly took a minute to catch. I also collected the clay from the riverbed at this point as well for the terracotta items required. I planned on using a sand, TNT and redstone block trick to quickly blow a hole in the ocean monument and quickly grab the prismarine items, which did then mean that I had to go on another creeping slaughtering spree for some more gunpowder for the TNT. But I eventually managed to grab all of the materials that I would require for the monument trip, so I set out across the cold ocean towards it. And to be fair, thanks to both of the potioned effects, it was actually a really easy job to blow a hole in the monument's roof, giving me access to the top floor of it. I collected the floating prismarine blocks from it and proceeded to get myself into a corner away from the Elder Guardian. I placed down some more TNT on top of the dark prismarine blocks and blew them up as well, which released the blocks for me to grab. So that was now officially everything from the exploration part of the run now collected. So after a quick teleport back to the colony, we were now ready for the actual creation of the builder's hut. To place down the builder's hut, I first had to make the hut's block by using the builder's tool from the supply camp and some simple wooden items. But before I could place it down, I first had to place down the town hall block and establish my colony, which was easily done as I was able to get the town hall block from the supply camp, quickly place it somewhere nearby, and then establish the colony within its interface. I placed down the tier 1 builder's hut in an area close to the supply camp and set it for construction, which our first citizen, Chase, took up the job as a builder for it. I quickly made up a resource scroll so that I could monitor the builder's progress with the build and to see what type of materials that he would request to make it. I supplied Chase with some basic wooden tools for use and helped him prepare the area around his hut so that he could begin constructing it. With the area now prepared for him, my next role was essentially just as an errand boy, supplying Chase with all of the items that he required in order to make the tier 1 builder's hut, which really didn't take long at all to complete as it was a very basic building. I immediately set the build to be upgraded to tier 2 next, and once again set to work getting him the items he required for it from my storage. At this point, I was starting to think about the podzol blocks that he would request for his tier 5 upgrade. So I planted some spruce trees close by in the hopes that they would sprout up together and create some podzol underneath. In the time it took me to make some bone meal to help them grow faster, the trees actually sprouted up in front of me, creating some lovely podzol underneath them. So, with the builder's help later on, hopefully that would then be the podzol sorted for when it came to tier 5. But with the tier 2 upgrade being just as simple as its tier 1 variant, it really didn't take too long for Chase to complete it too. So once again, the hut was set for upgrade to tier 3. This was the first difficulty step in the overall build, as this is where the mossy cobblestones, jungle, acacia and different coloured wool items then came into play. This upgrade would take him longer to create than the previous two due to its upgraded difficulty. But for myself, it was just the same story as before, with me crafting and giving him all of the items requested from my storage units. I did have a slight moment of panic whenever I realised that I had completely forgotten about getting any green dye from cacti when I was out exploring. The tier 3 upgrade required green wool for it, which, seeing as I hadn't collected any cacti during my travels, and the closest desert was quite a distance away, I thought I may have had to have left again just to travel out for some. Fortunately though, crisis averted, as the supply camp actually had a substantial amount of green wool just there for me to take, which, yes, I blindly hadn't noticed up until this point. So I was able to finally give him all of the materials that he was looking for, and after a bit of time, he had finally finished upgrading the build to tier 3. Now for the harder parts of the build, which would start to include the nether based items. I had previously combined the glowstone dust I mined up together to create the glowstone blocks for him. And the nether bricks were pretty standard to make as well, thanks to the piglins trading me some over. After combining a few pieces of quartz together, I was able to make him the quartz pillars as well. So with all of those items, alongside the soul sand and some other wooden items, he then pretty much had everything that he would then require for the upgrade. And whilst he continued to build, I just busied myself with creating some coloured items and stone-based items required for the tier 5 build. So it wasn't too much longer before he finally finished up the tier 4 upgrade as well. I was now on the last leg of the challenge, tier 5, which would include all of the end materials and the podzol blocks. I supplied him with all of the different items that he requested as per normal, with no real difficulty, as mostly everything had already been prepared by this point. In fact, I was able to get him absolutely everything for the upgrade, with the exception of the podzol. But this is where I was hoping that my plan would then come into play. I paused the upgrade to his builder's hut and set him a dig order on the podzol instead, with the hopes that he would dig up the podzol and then be able to use it for his build. Unfortunately though, even though he did come out to remove the podzol blocks from the area, he just simply dug them up as dirt, not as actual podzol. So without Silk Touch here, I was pretty much stuck. Up until this point though, he was supplied with absolutely everything that he required to go from tier 1 to tier 5 of his build, apart from the 4 podzol blocks. And I do hope that you can find it deep down in your hearts to forgive me for this, but after nearly 5 hours into this challenge, I was just not prepared to head back out just to get a Silk Touch enchantment. So I did go into creative mode and just spawned the 4 podzol blocks in, so that he officially then had everything that he required to complete the tier 5 upgrade, which he did at just over 4 hours and 48 minutes into the run. That was the challenge, now officially complete. This challenge took me close to 5 hours solid to complete, starting from absolutely nothing and going straight through every tier to a completed tier 5 builder's hut. Man, it was a tough challenge, but it was a really enjoyable one. If I had gotten a bit luckier with my time during the run, I could have spent a bit longer looking for diamonds to then make an enchanting table with, and maybe then get a Silk Touch enchantment. But for the sake of only 4 little podzol blocks, I'm honestly pretty happy to have been able to collect and supply the builder with close to 800 separate items required for the build. I of course have recorded all of this challenge, which if I get enough comments requesting so, then I can put the entirety of the recordings up on the channel as well. So please do let me know if this would be something that you would like to see or not in the comments below. And also, while you're down there, please let me know what you thought of this challenge and video as well. Would you like to see some other similar MineColonies speedrun attempts like this in the future? Thank you so much for watching, and if you have enjoyed this video, then please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel as well to see some more MineColonies content just like this. Thank you again for watching, and until next time, bye for now everyone. Bye bye.